Hello, my name is Hannah Buisman, and today I'm delighted to present my research project Translating Viticulture, which has been generously supported by the Farmers Club Charitable Trust and Snapshot Studies. So my reason for undertaking this piece of research, which involved visiting a vineyard and winery for a month in Italy, was because, as you can see behind me, we have recently planted a 6-hectare vineyard at our family farm in Hertfordshire, and I was looking to gain more experience, particularly in the winery side of the business, which is something that I don't know much about. And given the age of our vineyard, which is only a year and a half old at the moment, we're just on the cusp of really starting to think about winemaking. And so I wanted to see what kind of connection there was really between the viticultural practices and the winery. And so the goals I set out for my trip were to, in particular, compare new and old winemaking methods, with Italy being a country with a long history of winemaking. I felt this was an appropriate place to start this piece of research, or undertake it, I should say. And also I knew that the particular winery I was going to, or the one that I'd fortunately managed to connect with, called Tenuta La Ca, are particularly innovative in their winemaking. Another great kind of reason or goal for my visit to this winery in particular is because they have a very similar business model to us. It's a family business, it's of a comparable size to Italian standards, and also the two owners have come from outside viticulture back in to the industry, so brought with them different skill sets, much like myself, having returned to the family business after studying languages and going down slightly different career paths. So that comparison was something that I was really interested to explore, and of course to bring back any research and information that I could back to our new business, but also back to the new and ever-growing English viticulture sector. So I'm really excited to share those findings with you now, and first look through a little bit of what I was doing during my trip. What was so fantastic about my visit to Tenuta La Ca was being involved in every stage of the viticultural and winemaking process. Much like my family business at home, where everyone is involved in lots of different parts of the business, it was much the same at this particular winery and vineyard. So here I'm involved in rimontaggi, which is pumping over the wine, also in laboratory work, which I found absolutely fascinating, so testing pH, sugar levels, moving wine around the winery, also picking the grapes, bringing them into the processing unit, destemming, all of these different facets to the winemaking business, and of course bottling at the very end. One of my findings off the back of this really all-rounded experience was actually the laboratory work, and this was something that I didn't really take into consideration when thinking about winemaking, but actually the amount of testing we were doing at all stages of the winemaking process, right from when to pick, judge based on sugar content, whether that's testing literally by tasting the grapes or taking it into the laboratory, all the way through to testing the fermentation, again both by sense of smell and through scientific data, was something that I really hadn't considered, and it was absolutely fascinating being able to marry the sort of heritage techniques, as it were, so literally smelling and tasting and trying to build up that art, which of course takes a very long time, right through to the very scientific laboratory work where, you know, we're using different enzymes to bring out certain qualities to highlight and test elements of the wine, and also testing pH, things like that. It was also really fascinating in this particular vineyard at Tenuta La Ca that they use a lot of wild yeast, so rather than using commercial yeast, they are actually producing the yeast themselves, often from their own grapes. So that's something that I wasn't very familiar with, and is certainly a technique that I would now consider going forward, even though it does carry more risk in the winemaking process. So going back to that kind of new versus old, which is what I was really interested in when I set out on my visit to Italy, Tenuta La Ca were incredibly innovative, but they also bring with them all of the heritage techniques which Italy is really famous for. And so it was a real privilege to be part of the Bardolino winemaking process, which is the appellation for this particular area that I was working in. So seeing the traditional methods, creating this very historic wine, which is iconic to the area, using barrels, for example, so traditional materials and techniques. And then on the reverse of that, experimenting with Champenoise style sparkling wine, which is a new product for the winery, and using fascinating vessels, for example the Cliver, which is essentially a ceramic sort of sandstone based vessel, which is completely neutral and so limits this oxygen exchange which you may have in, or usually have in, oak barrels, for example, which imparts a lot of oaky flavours to a particular wine, and so thereby creating a really clean finish, much like you'd expect from a Champenoise style sparkling wine. So being able to see all those processes was really fascinating, and something that I've not experienced before and have very rarely seen in the UK, so something that I can also share with other colleagues in the sector. What I also found very interesting from a business point of view, and perhaps was an unexpected learning from this trip, was that the business management of marrying together winery and vineyard was very well balanced, and while in the UK there is definitely a hero mentality, I believe, around farming and the more hours the merrier, over there it was about efficiency, trying to constantly streamline all of the processes and really take into account the bottom line, and I found that a really interesting business model and something that I would definitely bring back to the UK, particularly trying to instill a work-life balance in what can be a very stressful time during harvest, and indeed marrying those two businesses the rest of the year. So in terms of moving forward, of course I took a lot away from the experience. Probably the key sort of aspect moving forward is that my business is now considering a winery of its own, something which was not necessarily on the cards before, because we've realised how much flexibility and innovation there is involved in winemaking, and really what a stamp we can put on our own wine, and how experimental and fun it can really be to explore all of those different options. So we're definitely considering that now. Also, this is the start of hopefully many exchanges. I built a really good working relationship with Tenuta La Ca and the team there. We had very similar business strategies and models, and so we are looking to potentially do another set of exchanges in future. So hopefully this is the first of many visits to the winery to build up my knowledge bank, and also to share what we're doing in the UK in such a new sector. And finally, with it being Translating Viticulture, the name of my project, there was certainly a great deal of translation involved. Having arrived in Italy with limited linguistic experience in the Italian language, I left really understanding quite a lot, and while this is an additional bonus to the actual research exchange, it's a very useful skill for me to have, given how much knowledge there is in Italy, but also in terms of machinery and general viticultural logistics. It's really important for me to have those skills, and just adds to my knowledge for future. So I'd like to finish up by thanking the Farmers Club Charitable Trust and Snapshot Studies for supporting this piece of research. It really is the beginning of a long translation of viticulture for me and my business, so thank you.